The cost of living crisis is proving a disaster for people struggling to make ends meet. But it's also proving awkward for a number of Tories who just can't help but reveal themselves as heartless ghouls. So far, we've had a gallery of feckless ministers and MPs telling us we should learn to cook and budget, that we should buy non-branded food, that we should turn the heating off, and that we should get off benefits and into work. And now we can add Home Office Minister Rachel Maclean to the group of top Tories showing their true colours. Appearing on Sky News, Maclean had this piece of advice.
But over the long term, we need to have a plan to grow the economy and make sure that people are able to protect themselves better, whether that is by taking on more hours or moving to a better paid job. And these are long term actions, but that's what we're focused on as a government.
You know, some people are working 3 jobs. They're working every hour that God sends them. And they're still going to food banks to get food because they can't afford to feed their kids. You know, so it's not as straightforward as that, is it?
No, and of course it's not. And I'm not suggesting that for one moment, but we have often heard in the past when people are facing problems with their budgets that one of the obstacles, and it may not be for everybody, one of the obstacles is about being able to take on more hours or even move to a better paid job. And of course, it's an individual situation depending on that particular family's situation. But that's why the job centres exist. That's why the work coaches exist. That's why we put the support into those job centres to work with individuals on their own individual situation. So it may be right for some people, they may be able to access additional hours, but of course it's not going to work for people who are already working in 3 jobs. And that's why we need to have the other measures in place, such as the all the help that we're putting into the schools, the help with the local authorities, help and support that I've already mentioned. And these are where we're going to target the help where it's most needed.
I know my suggestions won't help in the short term, and that's why we're introducing funding in schools and supporting local authorities. It was not very convincing, and that's for good reason. School funding has little to do with an immediate cost of living crisis, however important it might be. And even if it did, the Tories would have no reason to brag. As you can see from this graph from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, per pupil funding in the state sector fell from 2010 onwards. It's gone down from £8,000 per pupil in 2010 to £7,000 in 2021. In yellow on this graph, it's an important comparison. You can see per pupil funding in the private sector. That's continued to increase. That means the difference in resources available to state and private pupils has doubled from £3,100 in 2010 to £6,500 now. That's what she's bragging about. The other thing Maclean mentioned was support for local authorities. We can assume here she's talking about the Household Support Fund, which provided local authorities with £500 million to help Britain's poorest households. Unlike everything else the minister spoke about, this is actually a policy that is at least relevant to the cost of living crisis, but it also happens to be completely inadequate. The Observer reports that the scheme has been unavailable for months in many parts of the country because councils ran out of money in the face of surging demand. The Tories have now allotted another £500 million for the scheme, but Britain's leading anti-poverty charity says this won't be nearly enough. According to Katie Schmucker from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the support available from these sorts of schemes is useful for a one-off emergency, if your fridge breaks and needs to be replaced, for example, but they are not suited to dealing with a persistently inadequate income. The crisis we're facing is a result of very low incomes among the least well-off, as prices are rocketing but benefits are nowhere near keeping pace. These schemes have not come close to meeting the scale of the ongoing challenge. With the cost of living crisis set to become still more acute, schemes like this can't be relied on to protect people from hardship or the harms that come from it. Only a social security system that is fit for purpose can do that. So clearly, the one thing that was relevant to the cost of living crisis by that minister is nowhere near up to the task. Finally, let's turn to the main thrust of the minister's argument, so what she was talking about originally, and that's that to escape poverty, Britain should just work more hours. Now, for a start, that only works if people have a decent wage, and the Tories have a very bad record on this front. From 2010 onwards, wages collapsed from £530 per week to £500 per week. From 2014, they began to recover, but they did so incredibly slowly, and thanks to high inflation this year, they will actually fall. And crucially, we might ask why, even if we had decent wages, which we don't, we would aspire to working longer hours. Maclean is, of course, the Minister for Safeguarding, who in that very clip accepted that many people are working 3 jobs. That's not good for anyone. And it's especially terrible for parents, and bad news when it comes to safeguarding kids. If your mum or dad are working 3 jobs, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to be looking out for you. Ash, what did you make of those comments from Rachel Maclean?
One, these people actually believe this kind of shit. So that's why you hear Tory MPs coming out and saying, well, these households just need to learn to budget, or well, these people just need to learn how to cook, or well, these people just need to be able to work more hours or move to the better paid job, which is available, but for some reason they haven't all taken already. They say these things because they believe them, because their ideology means that they have to believe it, because they are deeply invested in a worldview where it's all about get on your bike and find a job. We are individuals, we are self-sufficient. And it's not that society is structured in an unfair way, which disadvantages people, which keeps them locked in a poverty trap, which means that you've got a phenomenon in this country where most people who are in poverty are also in work. No, that can't be the case. It must just be that there is some kind of individual failing or something that they don't quite realize about their situation. So I think that in some way she's being honest. I think the second thing is that she's up there flapping her gums about absolute nonsense because the Treasury haven't put forward anything serious to deal with the cost of living crisis. As you've said, the £500 million fund is deeply inadequate, and already many local authorities are saying, oh, all out of cash. Rishi Sunak, who is a real spending hawk, is not inclined to make the benefit system, a bit more bearable for people, or do things like increase the minimum wage at this time. You've also got the governor of the Bank of England encouraging people to reflect before they ask for a pay rise. So there is an establishment consensus here about balancing this crisis on the backs of workers, which is why you're not hearing anything useful coming out from either the Treasury or indeed the Bank of England. And I think the third thing to realise is that MPs are a product of a shit media, quite frankly. So they can go up there and be idiotic, because for the most part, it's not going to come back to bite them on the arse. Every so often, a clip like this will go viral and we'll all go, oh yeah, how stupid this person is. And they've been able to, climb the ranks of politics because we live in a political system which rewards mediocrity, quite frankly, because politicians aren't really pushed on anything that significant, particularly to do with the cost of living. Because if she had been pushed on this stuff before, she would know that in order to simply make up for the cut in the universal credit uplift, somebody on minimum wage would have to work more than 9 hours extra. So they'd have to find an extra working day that they weren't working already just to make up for the shortfall in their benefits. Now, if you add to that the kinds of increases in the cost of living that we're going to see, even if you did work more hours, a lot of that is going to be offset by things like losing out on your tax credits. Or if you're a parent, the exorbitant cost of childcare often means that it's not even really economical to work, because you're having to spend that money immediately on caring for your child who would otherwise be left unattended, sticking their fingers into plug sockets and whatever. It's a total lack of empathy and a lack of knowledge about people's everyday lives that politicians can get away with, because outside of little windows of crisis where journalists go, oh my God, have you noticed there's an economy? They're not really asked this kind of stuff. It's more to do with the sort of internal who's up, who's down in Westminster, or, silly crap, which doesn't impact people's lives at all.
All of us here at Novara Media are working harder than ever to keep scrutinising establishment politicians and the media barons who protect them. We don't have billionaire funders. We don't have advertising partnerships. We're funded entirely by you. If you've ever thought about supporting us, now's the time to go to novaramedia.com/support and donate anything you can from just £1 per month. Defy the corporate media. Join our monthly supporters and help build our supporter base to 10,000 strong.